Hello, this is Freak, and I just wanted to make a quick little video, sort of not ranting, but sort of extrapolating on a thought I had last night as I was watching Disney's Amphibia, which I've been watching season 2 of since that hit Disney Plus a little while ago. It's something I think I've thought about before, but it didn't really... I was never inspired to talk about it until today, which is that... sorry, I was checking the audio levels, but is that... let me turn that down. It's something that I call the Isekai Conundrum, a term I literally just made up last night. And it's when there's a bit of a writing disconnect between what the main character wants and what the audience wants. And normally in stories, you want to connect with the goals and ambitions of the protagonist, right? Ideally, you want what the main character wants. That makes their journey, engaging to follow. And so, when it comes to isekai stories, or another world stories, there are really two main flavors. There's a lot of subcategories and a lot of different things people do with them, but there's two overarching categories, reincarnation and transportation. And this doesn't really apply to the reincarnation category, which is, where someone dies and they get reincarnated in another world, Because in those stories, it's very clear that there is no going back, They had their life, they died, this is their new life in a different world, and that's just how it works, and there's no going back. And most of the time in those kind of stories, it's a wish fulfillment thing, so the protagonist rarely wants to go back in the first place, even if they could. So this conundrum doesn't really apply to reincarnation isekai, but it does apply to transportation isekai, where a protagonist is not reborn, but simply plucked out of their home world and dropped somewhere else. And in a lot of cases, the goal, such as Amphibia, the goal is to get back home, to return to their home dimension or whatever. And I think the idea of being stranded in a foreign place and wanting to return to your familiar home is something a lot of people can connect with intrinsically. But a conundrum occurs in terms of the writing when you start fleshing out the setting that the character's actually in and the people they meet and form these bonds with, in the case of Amphibia, getting adopted by a surrogate frog family. And those are the relationships you spend the entire show with. Those are the things that build up, and those are the things that the audience cares about. So when the protagonist's main goal is to leave all of that, to go back home, and most of the time we only get to see or hear about little snippets of their home life and why it's important for them to return to it beyond just the obvious implication that, you belong where you belong and whatnot. So I just thought that was an interesting sort of conundrum where you gotta... I don't think it's an objective fault or anything. I just think it's an interesting quirk of the genre that there's often an inherent disconnect between what the audience wants and the main character wants. Because the audience wants to return to something that the main character wants to return to something that we, the audience, aren't shown the value of, in comparison to what we grow attached to, which is the wrong thing, which is, the bonds in the world that they're in, that the show takes place in. That's what we get emotionally connected to. So when the protagonist wants to leave it, we're like, oh, why? This is awesome. I'm enjoying this experience because it's just a show for me, And I don't think there's a real answer to it. I don't know if it's an actual problem, but it's an interesting thing that I noticed, that it's one of the few genres where the protagonist's goals and what the audience wants are often unaligned. And I don't know, I just found that fascinating. So that's about it. Just a very quick little video talking about just a thing I thought about. And alright, there's another example I wanted to bring up where it can be used, this sort of conundrum can be used as a source of drama externally in the audience, and I'm sorry, I almost tried to end the video there, but I forgot I was going to bring this up. Spoilers for ReZero, but ReZero actually does something really interesting with this, where a lot of Japanese isekai in particular are more about wish fulfillment and escaping from a life that the protagonist kind of always wanted to leave. ReZero isn't really like that. It feels like it for the longest time, but it kind of isn't. And this particularly comes to a head in Season 2 when we learn about Subaru's parents, and we get to, over the course of an episode or so, we get to know and understand the environment that he came from, how he is the way he is, and his relationships with his parents, which are explored in surprising detail and emotional depth for, you know, a Japanese isekai story, which normally they because they're so focused on the escapism aspect, they usually don't cover these sorts of things. And so that increases the conundrum even more, because, you know, for most of the show, it's not really I mean, even after this flashback arc, it's not even like a goal for Subaru to return home or anything, not explicitly anyway. But, you know, before you didn't even think about the prospect of returning home. Even though this isn't a reincarnation story, it's a transportation isekai. Both Subaru and the audience never think about his home life. They never consider what he's left behind by being plucked into a different world. But this flashback arc of his parents causes us to reconsider that and see the value in returning home, and it starts to create sort of a, you know, an out-of-universe conundrum for the audience where, you know, at the same time we've grown attached to the world that Subaru finds himself in and the people he's met there and the bonds he's formed there, but at the same time we also don't want his parents to lose their son. Tape Nagatsuki's author comments don't help, where he states that his parents are worried sick and have been frantically searching for their lost son ever since he disappeared. And it's just like, you know, there's a sort of implied drama of being caught between worlds, which is really fascinating. So it's actually interesting that ReZero manages to kind of play even further on the isekai conundrum by, you know, it's not just that you don't, it's almost the opposite, because Subaru, at least as far as the anime shows, and at least as far as has been established thus far in the anime, I haven't read the novels, so maybe he goes into it more there, but he still doesn't want to return even after that. But now the audience kind of wants him to, because, I mean, we kind of do and we kind of don't, you know. I'm actually really interested in what the final resolution to ReZero is going to be. I'm actually not entirely sure if the resolution is going home or staying there. I could kind of see it either way, depending on what the overall message is, which I think is something that is still being built up. But yeah, that's an interesting aspect that ties into the thought process I had last night about this isekai conundrum. Should I, you know, as they say, should you stay or should you go? I'm not sure there's always an answer to that. Maybe there'll be multiple endings or something. Who knows? I wouldn't. Tape Nagatsuki. He writes a lot of offshoot, bad ends, alternate route sort of deal. So that actually wouldn't surprise me if he had like multiple endings. Maybe one where he returns and maybe one where he doesn't. That actually wouldn't surprise me too much. But you know, what ends up being, you know, canon and finalized in the light novels, after it's published in the web novels, I have no idea. But I just thought that was a very interesting sort of twist on the isekai conundrum. And I'm sure if I thought about it, I could probably think of more examples where, especially in the wants to return home sort of field of transportation isekai, where the audience's wants and the characters' wants are very much misaligned. Because even in these examples, we still understand the base motivation, like Anne and Amphibia. We still understand the base, motivations and whatnot. It just kind of hurts to think about in some cases, which I'm sure the show will address as well. But yeah, so yeah, those are just some of my thoughts on this sort of phenomenon that I've dubbed the Isekai Conundrum. Very interesting stuff, but I think I've elaborated as far as I can on this topic. So thanks for listening. Zeke Freak out. Ciao ciao for now.